Captain Naomi Carter's hands gripped the controls as Flight 3921 hurtled toward the Atlantic like a falling bullet. Passengers screamed. Oxygen masks whipped through the air. And the same racist flight crew who had sneered at her, ignored her warnings, and dismissed the black family's crying baby, now stood frozen in terror. 30 seconds from impact, there was only one person who could save them. The black woman they refused to believe. And this time, Naomi wasn't asking for permission. Captain Naomi Carter's hands gripped the controls as Flight 3921 hurtled toward the Atlantic like a falling bullet. Passengers screamed. Oxygen masks whipped through the air. And the same racist flight crew who had sneered at her, ignored her warnings, and dismissed the black family's crying baby, now stood frozen in terror. 30 seconds from impact, there was only one person who could save them. The black woman they refused to believe. And this time, Naomi wasn't asking for permission. Hours earlier, Naomi had joined the boarding line for Atlantic Skies Flight 3921 from New York to London. As a decorated former Air Force pilot with thousands of flight hours, and now an aerospace engineer, she knew aircraft inside and out. But as she approached the gate, a faint vibration from the left engine made her glance toward the tarmac. Something wasn't right. At the boarding door, Senior Flight Attendant Cheryl Grant greeted a white businessman warmly, offering him an upgrade to first class. When Naomi stepped forward, Cheryl's smile vanished. Naomi politely mentioned she'd noticed a possible compressor issue in the left engine and suggested maintenance check it. Cheryl's voice turned sharp. "We have professionals for that, ma'am. You should focus on getting to your seat." Inside the cabin, Naomi's attention snapped to row 14. A young black mother was bouncing her crying baby, her face pleading as she asked Cheryl for a blanket. "We'll see about that later," Cheryl said flatly before hurrying away. Moments earlier, Naomi had watched her coo over a white passenger's baby, offering warm milk and extra pillows. The double standard hit like a slap. Naomi's jaw tightened. She took her seat, 8A, beside journalist Lucas Reed, who had witnessed the exchange. When Naomi explained her background, his eyes widened. "So you really know what you're talking about with that engine?" She nodded, "and they're ignoring it." As the plane took off, the vibration worsened. Naomi pressed the call button, calmly explaining the issue again. Cheryl cut her off, this time loud enough for others to hear. "If you keep causing a scene, I'll have the captain notified." Moments later, a white man across the aisle mentioned he felt the vibration too. Cheryl's demeanor transformed instantly. "Thank you, sir. I'll inform the captain." Hours into the flight, turbulence struck hard. Oxygen masks dropped in sections, and the lights flickered ominously. Naomi stood to speak to the supervisor, Douglas Hale, but he blocked her path. "We have qualified crew. If you don't sit down, I'll have you restrained." His eyes held the same contempt as Cheryl's, and then he muttered under his breath, "Your kind always thinks they know better." Lucas's phone was already recording. That's when Naomi heard it, a baby's wail over the din. The same black mother from earlier was struggling to comfort her child. She'd asked for water 3 times and been ignored. Naomi pushed past Douglas to get it herself. Passengers began to notice. Murmurs spread. "Why is she being treated like that?" one woman called out. Minutes later, the left engine gave a shuddering groan. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing technical difficulties and an emergency descent. Cheryl looked pale, Douglas even paler. Then, a voice from the cockpit. "If anyone aboard has aviation experience, please step forward." Douglas went straight to a white man with a private pilot license, a man who flew small Cessnas. Naomi stood. "I'm a former Air Force captain, combat pilot, aerospace engineer. I know this aircraft model." Douglas didn't even look at her. "We found our help." The Cessna pilot hesitated. "She's more qualified than me," he told Douglas, but the supervisor refused to budge. Within minutes, Naomi felt the shift in the airframe, a failing electrical system. The cabin lights switched to emergency red. Lucas leaned in. They're going to kill us all if they don't let you in there. Passengers nearby agreed. A ripple of voices rose in unison, calling for Naomi to be heard. Finally, a younger flight attendant named Priya stepped up. "Captain's orders," she told Douglas, pushing past him to bring Naomi to the cockpit. Inside, the first officer froze. "Carter? Call sign Falcon?" It was Ryan Mitchell, her former wingman from the 2014 combat mission. In seconds, she was strapped in beside him, scanning the failing systems. "Engines dying. Electricals compromised. This pattern isn't random. It's a cyber intrusion," Naomi said. Ryan didn't argue. Together, they executed a split-second plan. Naomi would go to the electronics bay to bypass the compromised systems while Ryan kept the aircraft steady in the storm. Crawling into the cramped space, she found scorched connections and failing backups. Hands steady, despite the violent turbulence, she built a bypass from non-essential components, an ugly but functional battlefield repair. When the system reset, partial power returned, but they still had only one engine and minimal fuel. And then, chaos in the cabin. Lucas reported Douglas had been caught tampering with the fuel system, muttering about correcting her mistakes. Passengers restrained him until landing. With Shannon Airport's weather collapsing and fuel minutes from empty, Naomi proposed a last resort maneuver, the Falcon Run, a classified military low-approach technique. Ryan trusted her instantly. They descended through a narrow corridor of cliffs, riding terrain to shield against deadly crosswinds. At 300 feet, both knew they had one shot. Naomi adjusted flaps manually, calling out altitude. The landing gear slammed onto the wet runway, brakes screaming, the plane skidding toward the end. At 80 feet to spare, Flight 3921 shuddered to a stop. Cheers, sobs, and applause filled the cabin. But Naomi barely looked up. She was watching the Black Mother clutching her sleeping baby, safe at last. Weeks later, in a packed FAA hearing, Naomi's testimony helped bring down Atlantic Sky's leadership. Douglas faced criminal charges. Cheryl was fired. Mandatory bias training and passenger safety reforms swept the industry. Lucas's footage went viral under the hashtag #SheSavedUs. Naomi never called herself a hero, but as she boarded another flight months later, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome aboard the woman whose courage and skill saved Flight 3921. The cabin erupted in applause, and for the first time, Naomi allowed herself a smile. Stand against prejudice, and for heroes like Naomi, hit like if you'd trust her in the cockpit. Comment what you do on Flight 3921, and subscribe for more stories where courage destroys discrimination. Share this so the world never forgets.